Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. Right, if I'm breathing heavily, it's because I'm walking again. I'm actually going to an event tonight. Now, this is sort of connected to one I went to back in March, which I also filmed, where I went to a screening of a film called Merchants of Doubt. And so, this video is kind of a follow-up to that because it's going to be at the same place and organised by the same people. The Rose Hill and Iffley Low Carbon Community Action Group. This is, I actually said they were Low Carbon Hub last time. I made a mistake. I think I did correct it at the time. Anyway, a few little notes about this film. Firstly, for the first part of this review, or not the review, the first part of the film where I'm heading up towards the venue and towards the actual place and the event, I'm not going to turn the camera on myself. The reason is I'm wearing my disguise. The disguise I wore when I went to Granite Skeptics in the pub. The reason is, I don't know whether these people know who I am. And if they do, I'm not entirely sure whether they would welcome me. They might try to kick me out if they knew who I was. For this reason, I'm wearing my ingenious disguise, but no one would ever recognise me. I'm like Sherlock Holmes. So there's a bit of skullduggery going on tonight, I must admit. A bit of kind of something underhand, something sneaky. I'm going undercover behind enemy lines. Not enemy lines, I don't know. They were very nice people, actually. Enemy lines, not at all. But what's that called? Oppositional lines, then. Is that a better way to put it? Oppositional lines. Meaning that they disagree with me. Now, as time's getting on, actually, I have to get a move on. So I'm going to walk quite fast, so it means I'll be breathing heavily for the first part of this video, which will make it sound a little bit like a porno movie. A porno movie meets conspiratorial movie, which is a bit strange. That's something to boggle your mind a bit. Also, so I'm not going to show you what I look like until the second part of the interview. I take my disguise off when I come out. Second note, I'm not going to use the Steadicam effect. Now, I know this could be a bit annoying for some people, but I just don't have time to edit it because I want to upload this video before I go off to Probe tomorrow morning. I'm off to the Probe conference for the weekend, so I'm leaving about 6 a.m. I want to just basically put all these bits of the film together and then upload them. So I'm just trying to hold the camera steadily as I can. I've got like a counterweight, which is on my bag. And also comments, okay? Now, I should point out that I will be making another comments video very soon. Probably when I get back from Probe, or maybe at the end of the week, because I'm going off to see Ostain for a few days. I'll have my mind on other things, you know how it is. So, that's a few housekeeping issues sorted out. Now, what am I going to? I'm going to an event, which is a lecture by a man called Alan Rusbridger. Now, I've got to get to this place where I can read my notes, because I've made some notes here. Yeah, it said Alan Rusbridger is going to be doing a lecture tonight entitled Keep It in the Ground, and I'm going to show you the poster in a minute. It's a poster in the same place where I saw the last one for Merchants of Doubt. So you'll be seeing it in a minute. But Alan Rusbridger is who is it? He's a journalistic and also an environmental campaigner. That's his sort of like forte. He's quite a well-known journalist, actually. He was born in Lusaka, which was in northern Rhodesia, today called Zimbabwe, in 1953, and he studied at Oxford, right here in Oxford. Yes, we create the brains of the world, including carbonists and Agenda 21 specialists. I mean, the Oxford Martin School wasn't around when he was here. Oxford Martin School only opened in 2011, but no doubt he would have gone there if it had been open at the time. Okay, I'll just going to show you the poster, shed a bit of light on the subject. There's probably not enough light to see it, like last time, because it's dark. So here we go. Why don't I have these things? There we are. Oh, hang on. And the phone's gone off. Oh, bloody brilliant. Okay, keep it in the ground A free talk by Alan Rusbridger. Why journalists should sometimes be campaigners. Former editor of The Guardian, etc. 8 p.m, Thursday 29th of September. That's today. And it's only about 10 minutes away, so I better get a move on. Basically, yeah, so this chap was, he studied at Cambridge as well as Oxford. God blimey, that must have been awkward. And, what's the time now? Yeah, 10 minutes to go. Better get my skates on. He joined The Guardian in 1982 as a journalist. And by 1995 he was the editor. So he was obviously quite well connected, because some people work in papers for ages without ever becoming editors and all these other things. It's yeah, journalistic. So maybe he ticked the right boxes on the form. Well, maybe there's a reason for that, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about why his career might have been so successful. So yeah, he joined The Guardian, became editor in 1995, and I need another street light to see what I'm doing. He oversaw the online edition of the Guardian newspaper, where it became a modern internet-based newspaper. And he also changed The Guardian. When he was editor, it changed from being a broadsheet to a Berliner. Now, if you want to know what I'm talking about, I had to look it up. A broadsheet newspaper is one which has certain size and shape pages. Things like the Times and the Independent have these big wide pages. A Berliner is sort of like a cross between, it's sort of middle ground between a broadsheet and a tabloid. So he made it more like a tabloid than a broadsheet, which presumably saves on paper. You don't have to cut down so many trees, things like that. And a bit hot actually. Yeah, it's quite warm, you know, tonight. Quite nice weather we got. So it's actually been a lovely day actually for the time of year. So what a chap, what a guy. This is the guy who's going to be doing the talk tonight. Now he's got his good sides. I mean, like, he stood up for Julian Assange and Edward Snowden because when all this stuff came out, what's the guy? What's the name of the guy, the Guardian guy, who? What's his name? The man who first published Edward Snowden stuff. They received an order from the Home Office to to hand over all the documents related to Edward Snowden, what they learned about Edward Snowden, and Julian Assange. And that Julian Assange and the other guy, whose name I can't believe I've forgotten, it'll come back to me, Glenn Greenwald. God blimey, I must be getting old. Glenn Greenwald wrote about Edward Snowden, published stuff, and of course Rusbridger approved that because he was the editor. The Home Office ordered him to hand over all documents relating to this case, and to his credit he refused. Now, I know if you watch Rich Planet TV, Richard D. Hall is absolutely convinced that Snowden and Assange are controlled opposition. I'm not so sure. I think they may actually be the real thing. The Illuminati do not control everything, not absolutely everything. Things go wrong. I think that's why Trump is in for the presidency, because he's not meant to be there. Jeremy Corbyn, I don't think was meant to get where he is. Anyway, I digress. Back to Mr. Rusbridger. Yeah, what he did was, he actually destroyed all the hard drives which contain the Snowden and Assange material. Now, if you watch the film The Fifth Estate, you will know him, because Alan Rusbridger is in that film. It's kind of like, not a documentary, it's a fictionalisation of the Assange Snowden affair. And Rusbridger's in it. He's played by Peter Capaldi, the Doctor, the 12th Doctor, and current Doctor. Probably one of the best, I'd say. And in 2015, though, he quit The Guardian. He's left The Guardian, and he's gone on to do other things. I wonder what. Well, we're going to find out probably a bit more. But anyway, he's become an environmental campaigner, going around talking about keep it in the ground. Keeping in the ground refers to not mining for fossil fuels, not drilling for oil, keeping it in the ground, etc., etc. So it doesn't produce carbon emissions. Just the Rosehill and Iffley low carbon group don't like. Low carbon. That means they don't burn their toast. But it's true though, isn't it? Carbon is a solid, it's not a gas. What they're referring to when they say carbon is carbon dioxide gas. But it's just been rebranded as carbon by probably some publicity group, Saatchi and Saatchi or something. Now, this is the interesting bit, okay? This is the bit which really made my jaw drop. Mr. Alan Rusbridger is governor of the Ditchley Foundation. Yes, the Ditchley Foundation. Now, if you don't know what the Ditchley Foundation is, I don't know if I'll put a link in the description box. Maybe I shall if I remember. I ought to remember things like this. But the Ditchley Foundation is an organisation which is rather like the Bilderberg Group. Similar to the Bilderberg Group in many ways. Very secret. It's only partly secretive. I mean, it publishes an annual report, but the Bilderberg Group publishes nothing. So it's less secretive than the Bilderberg Group, but it does hold secret meetings in the Ditchley Park place, Ditchley Park Stately Home, near Oxford, not far from where I live, near Charlbury in Oxfordshire. And I've actually been there. Now, if I've made a video about it, you can see the video on YouTube where I actually take a trip and I do a little bit of snooping around Ditchley Park. And here's another thing, right? He's also the leader of the 1010 campaign. The 1010 campaign, you know, the one I talked about before, the exploding school children. Yeah, 1010. Reduce your carbon emissions by 10% by 2010, or we'll blow you up in the middle of your school and cover your classmates with blood. Yes, that one. He's part of that as well. So, well, I'll be saying more about that later, but that makes him suspicious in my view. Well, and interesting thing, there was a news story today which said that carbon emission, the level of carbon dioxide, I'm not going to call it bloody, I'm not going to use this Orwellian language, the level of carbon has just reached past 400 parts per million, which means it's now permanently above the point of no return, according to the carbonists. Now, there we are, Rosehill Community Centre. I'm going to head on in and I will see you later. I'll let you know how I get on and I'll tell you a little bit more about what happened. See ya. Well, I'm out. And you can see me now. You can see me, well, it's dark so you can't see me much. I'm actually going a different way than I normally go to go home because I need to be somewhere where there's plenty of street light so I can see. Well, I've got made a few notes, I want to be able to read them. You know, not that I need them particularly, but yeah, he was saying this is a guy, interesting guy. I got in there and it was amazing. It was the same room I was in last time. And so I'm trying to keep the camera steady. I'm using my bag as a counterweight on my arm to try and keep my hand steady as possible. So you might be going a bit dark at some points. You might not be able to see me. I might have to switch on the night light in a minute. But basically, this chap, he was full house in there. I mean, it was a full house. I mean, it's the same room I was in when we saw when we watched the Merchants of Doubt. Only this time, there's about 5 times as many people. I reckon there was over 100 people in there easily. There's some people standing. I was sitting. No, I'm not going to say where I was sitting because people might identify me from that. Because I was on a secret mission to infiltrate. I'm going to put the night light on. To infiltrate the Rosehill and Iffley low carbon group, and I don't want them to know who I was. No one saw through my disguise. Nobody recognised me. Although you must know me now because after the video I made about Merchants of Doubt, because I went to the last one I went as I was. I've not disguised myself. This time, of course, I have disguised myself for that reason, for the reasons I explained at the beginning. And it was a full house, loads of people there. Absolutely packed out. People sitting along the outside, on the window ledge, standing in the corners, things like that. I'll turn the night light off now, because if you have the night light on and there's lots of other lights, it distorts your image. Yeah, completely full house. The guy, Alan Rusbridger, he was sort of quite tall, dark-haired, academic-looking man. An academic, and he been in the Guardian, like I said. He started the talk by saying, climate change, has journalism failed climate change? That was the question he posed. And he said, yeah, he said, where am I? Yeah, sorry. He said that when he left the Guardian, it was like someone had taken a big megaphone away from him. He said being editor of the Guardian was like having a big megaphone. And when he left the Guardian, it was like someone had taken it away from him. And I had this image of Alex Jones. Oh, put the nightlight on again. Although Alex Jones has gone kind of mainstream now. He's saying, elect Trump and everything will be fine. All you have to do, elect Trump. The New World Order will be over. No, it won't. Trump's going to die. But that's a story for another video. Yeah, he'll die before November, if his polls don't collapse very soon. Yeah, so he said, someone had taken my... I knew I was going to leave the Guardian. He didn't explain why he was going to leave the Guardian. He said, I knew I had to leave the Guardian. Maybe that he got his orders from the Ditchley Foundation. They told him he had to. Maybe that was it. But he left the Guardian, and someone else called Catherine Viner took over, whoever that is. Funny how all these people, like, that's another thing. Skeptics and environmentalists always have one thing in common. Major skeptics and major environmentalists. Right? They always have columns in the Guardian. It's like you can't be a proper skeptic or a proper carbonistic campaigner unless you have a column in the Guardian. Kind of like goes with the territory, you know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, I think I didn't see Mark Linus in there. I was looking out for him. Mark Linus is someone I think might have seen through my disguise, because I've given him such a hard time over the last few years. I've really slagged him off, as regular viewers will know. Yeah, he. So I thought he might see through my disguise, but he wasn't there. Oops. So I'm off the pavement now. He was not there, so probably just as well. I could cross over the road. Here I am. So yeah, I'll go down this way actually, because yeah, there's a. If I go back the other way, there's not enough light. You won't be able to see me. I know some of you might want that. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, he won an award in Sweden. I think this is the Good Living Award, which is sort of like the alternative Nobel prizes. So I don't know if that's any good. But he won one of those in Sweden with somebody else, and they suggested. This guy said to him, "There's no point when you're campaigning with the environment on climate change. There's no point doing it with the environmental correspondent. There's no point doing it with the scientific correspondent. You have to go political and economic, because science and environmentalism are not enough." And he said, and so they planned a campaign. And of course, like with they've done a lot of things. Like I said, they worked on the WikiLeaks thing, the WikiLeaks issue. The Guardian covered the phone hacking thing for 10 years. And he thought, well, what should we do next? So I'll go down. I'll go down here. What should we do next? And they said, I know, climate change. But what are we going to do it? So apparently this is George Monbiot's idea. That's someone else I've slagged off quite a bit recently, and he wasn't there, luckily. Mind you, he's moved out of Oxford now. He lives in Wales. Mark Linus still lives around here, though. I'm not bumped into him yet, but I'm sure I'm bound to sooner or later. But it was Monbiot's idea. Monbiot came out with a single sentence that described the situation completely, and it was like a whole paragraph in one sentence. And so Rusbridger said, George, we can't put that on a placard. Can't print t-shirts with that on. So what are we going to do instead? And eventually they came up with the slogan, keep it in the ground. Now this is where it gets interesting, okay? Because he's a journalist, he knows how to organise campaigns, who do you target and things like that. And they said, No point with who do we do? Consumers? Can we persuade consumers to go low carbon, to stop using fossil fuels and have smaller cars and take fewer baths and things like that, and have solar panels and on their houses and things like that? And no, too late for that. Yeah, see, they can't persuade us. He comes back to this later, and then he says there's no point going to the fossil fuel companies because it's a sort of conflict of interest sort of situation. Although later on he does interview the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell. That's it. So I go down here. It's nice down here. And then he said, who are we going to go to? They said the various banks and other institutions, financial institutions. No, he said, and this is where he says, he said something very ironic. I thought he said we really want to target liberals here because liberals are nice people. Liberals are the only people who ever change their minds. And I thought, oh God, my poise was very hard to maintain at that point. Liberals, nice people. I suppose because the Guardian is sort of intelligent liberal paper, you know, it's a middle class liberal, left-wing kind of paper. So they see themselves as nice people. But I have to disagree. Liberals are the people who are most likely to ask the state to intervene in anything they want. They're the people most likely to tolerate, they're the least likely people to tolerate opposing opinions. It's liberals who are the people who are most likely to get arsey with you if you simply disagree with them. It's liberals are the people who call... It's liberals, left-wing people, who describe me as a racist and a sexist and a misogynist and an anti-Semite, which they have done. When I'm completely innocent of all those things. Okay, and not the Conservatives can be... Not the Conservatives are all nice people, no they're not, but... I think they have a sense of fair play, which liberals lack. But anyway, that's so I sort of like scoffed. I sort of rolled my eyes a bit when he said that, behind my disguise. I won't say exactly what my disguise was like, but my eyes were disguised. And he said, well, why? So what did he do? Who do we go to? He says, I know. He said, let's go to the Wellcome Trust and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yes, they're nice people. We don't want Goldman Sachs, no, they're horrible. We'll go to the Wellcome Trust and Bill and Melinda Gates. Yeah, so he approached them and with his campaign. Oh, God. But the Wellcome Trust is the people who produced, I believe, several dangerous drugs such as Vioxx, which actually has terrible side effects which they try to cover up. Wellcome Trust is a big pharma giant. I don't know if they produce vaccines or anything, but I bet you they're in with the people who do. He will cover up like the dangers of vaccination and things like that. And he says things like, you know, why is it climate change is not on the front pages? It's the biggest story of our time. He says it's a situation in which man bites dog is headlines, dog bites man is not. That's some kind of journalistic slogan. I don't quite understand it. But he said it's the biggest story of our time. It should be on all the front pages. So we went to that nice Bill and Melinda Gates and said to them, we need your help. And that kind of fits because we know, you know, I've talked about Bill and Melinda Gates before. I've talked about that in my zombie video about the depopulation agenda and things like that. And he says there's reasons why. There's several reasons why you don't get climate change on the videos. We're going to go into a dark bit. I think I'll just stay here because it's light here. The reason you don't get climate change, it's quite a nice spot anyway in the woods here. This little lane, this little alleyway. He says several reasons. Firstly, the financial crisis, which has affected journalism because newspapers have had to go online because they can't compete with the internet. Good job. Press owned by climate change deniers. Did he really say that? I don't know about that. What is it? Oh yeah. The need for clarity. Because this is very interesting, isn't it? What's he saying? Is he saying that needing clarity means if you're going to talk about climate change, you have to be less clear. You have to be nebulous. You have to launder something that might be very simple behind a lot of complicated jargon. So then they call you crazy if you don't believe in that sort of thing. And he talks about false balance. I talked about impartiality, the need for impartiality, false balance, which the BBC are guilty of. Oh dear. The irony is incredible. The irony in the things he was saying is absolutely incredible. Oh yeah, the false balance is something that skeptics go on about. They say, what they basically say is, we don't like false balance. So if you have someone on the false, why they call false balance is when you have someone on the news who is in favour of vaccination. You have to have someone else to disagree with them who is an anti-vaccination person. Skeptics call this false balance. They say it's like discussing human reproduction and having someone who believes in storks delivering babies. That's completely false. That's a completely false analogy. And as far as climate change goes, that is the case as well. I don't know if you... I'll put a link in the description box to my review of Professor Brian Cox, who was on Australian TV debating with a climate change denier. Yeah. Oh yeah. But anyway, he used the word climate change denier after less than 10 minutes. I was quite impressed. You know, that it didn't. Usually it's about 2 minutes it takes these people to use the word climate change denier. As I said before, this kind of language, this kind of Orwellian language, is very, very effective in propaganda terms. And he also says that climate change works slowly, so you can't always notice it. It doesn't get in the news because it works so slowly. Oh yeah. Yeah, and there's also things about don't frighten people, he says. You've got to be optimistic, you mustn't frighten people. And I think here he's implying that climate change, the story of climate change is essentially a pessimistic, gloomy, terrifying prospect. He's starting to sound like Professor Guy McPherson now, you know, the guy who says, we're all doomed! Doomed! So there you are. That's what he says. So they don't frighten people, so they don't talk about climate change, so they want to frighten people. They want to sell newspapers, basically. Anyway, he talks about this debate between two reporters, someone called Dewey and Lippman, that is their surnames. And they, back in the, I think it was like around about the turn of the 20th century, these two guys had a debate the outcome of which led to the future of journalism. Dewey said that basically journalists should treat the public as intelligent adults and persuade them and explain things to them in a way that they will understand. Lippman said, no, people are too stupid to understand everything. We have to use various tricks of psychology to just convince them and allow them to follow a certain message. Guess who won? Yeah, exactly. Lippman won. And it sounds like the sort of thing that Edward Albanese was going into anyway. But this debate is apparently fundamental in journalism. And he said, thing is, this is a very interesting bit, because Rusbridger said, hands up who's a Dewey person here. And of course, most people raised their hands, including me. And he says, anyone here who's a Lippman person? And this is interesting. About 10 people raised their hands. Roughly, I'd say 10% of the people in the room raised their hands. I think Rusbridger was joking, but I think people took him seriously. I think that was a joke that didn't come off, because people took him seriously. And there are obviously people who are Lippman people in the environmental movement, and I shouldn't be surprised. But this is basically what a lot of them believe. I think they were taking him seriously, and they were answering honestly. They do believe with Lippman. They believe people shouldn't be explained to about climate change. They should be led. They should be tricked into following a certain agenda. They should be just led along and should not be treated, yeah, he said, and of course you not be treated as intelligent adults. And of course you get terms now like post-fact, post-factual, or post-truth. Post-truth! It's like post-democracy. You hear all these things, these sinister words that have become quite common nowadays. Post-truth journalism. And he said the best thing to do is keep it simple. He said don't blind people. See, because in a sense he's taking the kind of Lippmann stance in a sense, because he said someone came up with an equation which just had 3 figures in it. 2 degrees, that's the temperature above which the global average temperature goes above 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Presumably that means that doesn't mean the pre-industrial level during the medieval warm period. But we don't talk about medieval warm periods, do we? 565 gigatons, which is the amount of carbon TM that is needed to be injected into the atmosphere to create 2 degrees of warming, and 2,795 gigatons, which is the amount that's actually estimated to be in the world's fossil fuel reserves underground. Hence the term, keep it in the ground. And he said those three things made it very, very abundantly clear to the reader exactly what was going on and what was necessary. Now, this is a funny thing. He actually interviewed the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell. And he didn't talk very much about that conversation, but I'd be very, very interested to read up on it. I'm sure it's still on the Guardian website. Because I'm sure the chairman, he made all the right noises, you know. Yes, indeed. We are very keen on renewables. We are going to transform our business into one of renewables. Exactly. And then when he goes out the room, he's calling his men in black. You know, keep an eye on that man. Now, one thing he said was, it's interesting. This is very interesting indeed. He said one thing he was absolutely determined to do in this campaign, keep it in the ground, is no populism. And he says no polar bear photos. This is interesting, because is he confessing that the polar bear photos that were in the media before were misleading? Is he confessing that they were designed to perhaps fiddle with our emotions to shut down our rational mind? We see this poor little polar bear sitting on a melting ice cap, and it moves, it tears our heartstrings so much that we forget. Polar bears are excellent swimmers. They can swim for hundreds of miles. So he was going to avoid that. That's almost like a confession that it was a lie all along. And he talks about carbon time bombs. Now, he says the biggest carbon time bomb is India, because India is now modernising and developing. Are they going to go nuclear and renewables, or are they going to go to fossil fuels and coal and gas and oil? The funny thing is, he brought up nuclear, but he didn't go into it in detail, because nuclear is a bit of a contentious issue within the environmental movement, which is maybe why Mark Linus wasn't there, because Linus is a big pro-nuke guy. He made this film Pandora's Promise. He produced this thing, and that's always a little bit dodgy, because I think most of the mainstream Greens are sort of renewables only. They're opposed to nuclear power. He names and shames the dirty 100. He puts up this article on with all this oil dripping down, this dirty dripping black stuff, and it signifies the dirty oil. These are the biggest carbon polluters in the world. He gets celebrity endorsement, and then he gets people to make a video. He makes a video. He says, make your own private videos with your own cameras and send them to Bill Gates, and we'll pick the best of them and we'll put them into this compilation. So the Guardian produces this very moving, heart-rending kind of like picture of ordinary people around the world talking into their camera phones, going, please help me, Mr. Gates, invest in it, keep it in the ground, please, Mr. Gates. Oh yeah. So a lot of very interesting things, and I mean, there were several. It was quite a short lecture. It was only about an hour long, and then there was the Q&A where people talked about carbon credits are no good, and he talked about in a heartfelt way. This was a black guy talking about people defending the Amazon, and he says, "Oh, they've got brown skin, so no one cares about them. They're on the other side of the world." And someone else says, "Why not target politicians directly?" People questioned the gigaton figures in the three-stage equation I talked about. Somebody says climate change has to be mixed with social justice, such as relieving people of tax and investing in making it more economical for ordinary people to use renewables. How about plastics? Will plastics be still used in the industry? In oil? Will oil still be needed for plastics? How do you keep that industry going? And then there was the RILC, that's Rose Hill Ifley Low Carbon Report, where this chap come up and talked about solar installation. This was after Alan Rusbridger had finished, so they had the sort of like, they had the minor feature, the secondary feature, the B movie. Okay, I'm going to go home now. But I think the big thing that was not mentioned, and I was surprised it was not mentioned, is the issue. I'm going to put the nightlight on. I'm going to walk through the park. Is the issue of the 400 parts per million thing. I'll probably have to do an article on this, because I did an article on New Year's Day 2015 on Japan My Voice. I won't be able to remember all these damn links. You can find them, can't you? You can find them. But I did this article where these people are talking about hang on, I've got to go through this turnstile, this stile now. Hang on, what's this thing here? What do you call this thing? I don't know. I'm only just I can't hardly squeeze through it. I'm too fit. I'm too fat. 400 parts per million. That's the level. No, yeah, that's the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now. It's just been published. It's crossed the 400 parts per million level. Now, in New Year's Day 2015, there was a talk about how 2015 is the turning point. That's why they made that awful film, The Age of Stupid. It's the turning point in the carbon thing, in the carbon emissions, in the issue to do with whether or not the climate can stabilise. And if you go past that point, the climate is going to go into a spiral downwards where whatever we do, nothing will make any good, because there's so much. It's now warm enough that there'll be certain effects triggered which will essentially make it a self-sustaining cycle into greater and greater warming. And they talk specifically about the releasing of methane hydrates from under the ocean, which is like methane hydrate, of course, can be found all over and is everywhere. It happens when things decompose. It's an animal digestion, which means farting basically. That's methane hydrate. But there's a massive storage of it, frozen underneath the sea, and I think the idea is that once we go over a certain amount, 400 parts per million, they won't be able to stop it reaching 2 degrees warming. They won't be able to stop that methane hydrate being released. And Mark Linus actually tweeted today, just before I came out, I saw it. We've crossed 400 parts per million, and this is kind of like the point of no return for climate change, if you believe in that sort of thing, which I don't. As I've explained before, I don't believe in climate change. Yeah. Man-made climate change. I don't have to go through that again, do I? So basically, that never came up in the meeting, but I'm sure it was at the back of people's minds. So, what's going to happen now? Now, this is something I'm going to have to keep an eye on. I have a feeling we're going to see an increase in the profile of geoengineering in the next few months and years. And I think Mr. Linus is going to be behind it. Probably George Monbiot will as well. And they're going to jump on that bandwagon. Linus has proved himself to be very susceptible to ideas that are unpopular both in the mainstream and in the green movement. And we are in Oxford. Linus is in Oxford. We have the Oxford Martin School on our doorstep, which is the only place on earth, well, I think it may be the only place, certainly the principal place on earth, where you can actually get a degree in geoengineering. Purely hypothetically, of course. And when that happens, we're going to talk. There's going to be serious talk about post-democratic policies to protect the Earth from climate change. And in the chilling words of Stanley Mayer, not Stanley Mayer, what's his name? Dr. Mayer Hillman. He said the democratic process has so far failed. I'm paraphrasing now. The democratic process has so far failed to produce any action on climate change. The people are only interested in having their holidays in the sun and having as many children as they like in their big fast cars, and politicians do nothing except pander to their whims to get elected. Do we continue down this path of democracy in the hope that people's minds will just change, or, as I would argue, democracy has to be put aside? These changes have to be made whether the public like it or not. That is the kicker. What Dr. Mayer Hillman said is what a lot of other people are thinking, secretly probably most of them. Hillman's probably more outspoken than most. But that is the issue here. This leads into things such as Gender 21. It's also in the news that the United Nations is about to take over the internet. It's been run by private corporations in America for the last few years. It's going to be handed over to the United Nations in a couple of days. So therefore, the internet, we're going to see more censorship of the internet. In fact, you might even see videos like this one gone. So please download it if you can. Download it and keep it. Things like that, that's going to happen. I mean, I don't know how bad that's going to get. Some people say you can't censor the internet completely. And I don't think you can, actually, because you can't completely censor it, but you can make it very much more difficult. Things such as video sharing sites and things like that, and blogs and that, they can be deleted. You might have to go underground with the dark web, file sharing and stuff like that. We're going to see, it's all in Agenda 21. It's all in Agenda 21. Andrew Johnson has just made a new DVD about this. He's done a new lecture on this. Now, I would just say to people, I mean, I'm going to turn the nightlight off now because I'm going back onto the street. The people who rant on about climate change deniers and things like that. I mean, I covered this. I don't want to repeat myself, because I don't want to repeat what I just said in my previous videos. My previous video about because I did a video about Merchants of Doubt. I don't want to repeat the things I said in that, but this is what I would like to say to people who call me a climate change denier. Apart from all the fact that there's all this there is scientific consensus in the sense the majority of climate scientists believe it, but they're living in an intellectual environment in which, if they don't believe it, they apply for a job at Pizza Hut. We're having terrorism, essentially, emotional terrorism and psychological rape. I mean, and Alan Rusbridger is involved in this because he's in charge of 1010, the 1010 campaign. And as I said, I said earlier, I think, this is the one where you see the exploding school children. This was produced at a very, very high budget. They had Gillian Anderson in it. They had David Ginola, the football manager. They had people like that. They don't get out of bed for less than £10,000. And you see the children, school children, exploding, and their flesh and blood flies around the room, covering the other children, who then scream with fear. This was going to be shown on primetime TV. It was shown to a test audience. This is the thing, right? Some clever dick is now going to say, well, Ben, that was never shown. It was never shown on TV. No, it was not shown on TV. It was shown to a test audience who basically almost broke down with horror at the sight of it, and so they decided not to broadcast it. But the fact it was produced at all must surely give people pause for thought. And Alan Rusbridger is in charge of the organisation that produced that film, getting Richard Curtis and Monty Python to direct it. Again, it's a high budget thing. It's like common purpose corporate videos are directed by, guess who? Ridley Scott, top Hollywood director. Ridley bloody Scott. And where was it? Yeah, and I'm just saying that the fact that basically we are living in a world in which the political agenda is towards greater and greater authoritarianism, towards a world in which there a resource-based economy, internationalism, the breakdown of the nation state, the breakdown of local community sovereignty, the breakdown of the family structure. The list goes on. The breakdown of all the other things, the Orwellian stuff, the mind control, the language police, the thought police, the language codes, the political correctness, stuff like that, all the cultural Marxism, all this stuff is coming about. And they can't, if they do it openly, if they just say we're going to do it, no one will want it. But as David Icke talks about problem, reaction, solution, at the very same time in history that the politicians are driving us towards this New World Order agenda, at the very, very same moment in history, a problem has emerged of global consequences that has threatened to destroy the planet and kill humans and everyone and most other life on Earth, which coincidentally requires the very, very same policies to prevent as the politicians want to bring in anyway. So I ask people, before you call me a climate change denier and demonise me, just think about that. Think about whether you also should be suspicious at that strange synchronicity, along with all the other issues I've talked about. So, Well, I'm off to probe now. I'm not going to do video probe. I don't want to jump the shark there, but I'm going to cover this on Hapanwo Radio next week, and there will be a comments video, as I said. Coming up within the next week or so, there's going to be a comments video. Okay, so thank you very much for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.